Okay, so my first resource is a book. Carey Nieuwhof, Didn't See It Coming. So this book, I think often when resources impact us, it's where they find you at that point in your journey. So for me, I had just been finishing my AOG training as my MIT. My mentor at the time, we'd met for coffee, and my mentor is Neil Cameron which is just a church like 20 miles from us, a great guy. And he had recommended this book, Didn't See It Coming. There's points in life where things haven't gone well. Do you know what I mean? So this is a season that I'm in. I've lived through quite a difficult situation, not just for a month or a year, but for about 8 years. And this was a book where, in the description of the book, it says this: overcoming the 7 greatest challenges that no one expects and everyone experiences. So,
Wow.
yeah. So it's kind of like, it's a very real book. Do you know what I mean? I picked it up. It was one of those, I picked it up and chapter after chapter, I thought, oh, I can relate to this. So the 7 things that he spoke about was cynicism, compromise, disconnectedness, irrelevance, pride, burnout, and emptiness.
Wow. Well, let's dive into a few of those. Which ones did you resonate with you? Which resonated with you most, and how did that help you kind of work through some of those things?
Yeah, well, I think so for me, I wouldn't have said I was a cynic. I would have, but that's the first one that came up in the book. And I think when life happens, that's when I'll always remember as a teenager, I'd have been the one at the altar calls it, Lord, here I am, send me. Do you remember that moment when you're just so excited for Jesus, you're ready for whatever he's got for you? And at this point in time, I'd been serving in the church, I'd been employed, I was still the kids pastor at this point, so I'd been employed for probably about 10, 12 years, been in ministry for a while. But life had happened, and I was a bit more cynical than I had realized. The joy wasn't there. Carey Nieuwhof speaks about cynicism or curiosity. And that curiosity and what's next. And it was a real challenge as I read the book, because it wasn't a label I'd have put on myself, but I found myself in that place. So really challenged me and where I was at. I think the biggest one for me as I read through the book was disconnectedness. Just that feeling disconnected from what I felt a bit part of before. And the other one, oh, I was quite a few actually, I suppose. It spoke about burnout, and I wouldn't say I was burned out, but I was at that place where everything was just heavy. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah, yeah.
And yeah, I was just so much in the book. I thought, oh, that is me. So no, it's a great book for wherever you're at. The emptiness, he speaks about self-medication. I wasn't self-medicated, but that whole self-care, because of where I was at, the self-care just wasn't there. So it was putting back in good things into my everyday routine. Challenge in those moments when your mind can go, because the disconnectedness, I think, if that had continued to go, it then puts space between where you should be and where you are. And even when it came to team, when it came to church, when it came to family, yeah.
No, that's really interesting to hear, and I think every minister listening to this will have noticed probably times in their life, or maybe even are going through those times right now where they're having to deal with that. How does this book help in terms of being able to provide steps forward? What are those? Are there things that you learnt through reading the book that really helped you to be able to move forward and through those seasons of, cynicism and disconnectedness and those kind of things?
Yeah, so everything that is there is the opposite. So you've got almost the negative, but then you've got what you're aiming towards. So like I said, for cynicism, it's going from that to curiosity, to going back and looking at things differently, being curious again, and rather than thinking it's not going to work out well, having that positive approach to the situation. When he spoke about compromise, none of us mean to compromise. But I think things can compromise. I think for me, when it came to compromise, it spoke a lot about character and your competency. And I think where at times I had character, the compromise that came when you are hurting, and we often hear this, don't we? Hurt people hurt people. And there was times that I would react, and I knew fine it wasn't me. So not that my character was necessarily compromised, but how I was the real me wasn't coming through because you had all this hurt in the way. But he speaks about building that back up and letting your character shine through and working on your character rather than compromising who you are. And I think for me, I was very much broken at that time, and it was building back up again. For the disconnectedness, I had to stop that thing inside my head that would say, "Oh, but people don't want you there," because that's real. That's, do you know what I mean? I was in that place of, well, they won't be wanting me. They're better doing it themselves. So I had to. It almost gave you the tools to help you to get back to where you should be. That's what I would say. When it spoke about pride, obviously the opposite of that is being humble. It speaks about gratitude, giving thanks for things, and kind of really following through on that. It was interesting when I read Irrelevant. So that wasn't one necessarily that I felt, but often he speaks about leaders who now feel irrelevant. But if you don't change, you're over here and people have moved on. And so that was that. He gave some really good examples in that as well. So I found the book very helpful because it wasn't just the negative things, but it was the challenges along with a lot of tools to help.
It seems like it's one of those books that is a kind of a, an MOT for yourself. It's one of those personal MOT books. And I think there are a number of books that do that. And this seems like it's a really great one, especially specifically for the ministry. You get some which are maybe less completely ministry focused, but this one seems like it's got a very much a ministry focus to it. Yeah.
You're not a Christian. He actually says that at the beginning of the book. It's written for Christians.
Yeah.
So if you're not a Christian, you're going to get something from the book, but it's not going to be the same. And I think if we're honest as leaders, there's all periods in our ministry where there's that lull, where there's that it's really hard. And I think for me, that's probably why Neil recommended it. He had read it and he'd said it was a great book for him. And I got a lot out of it. I've recommended it to other people and then had texts. See, like how somebody recommends a book and then months afterwards you get a text going, "Oh, I've just read that book." That's really been a blessing to me. So I found that over the years, this is one of the ones that I have recommended because you want to serve the Lord all the days of your life. You don't want the challenges to stop you. And I think it's that whole thing of where you start in ministry. It's great, isn't it? But as it says in Psalm 27, we want to serve the Lord all the days of our life. We need to get to the end well. We need to live well. So for me, this is one of these books that just helps to kind of shift back on track. And then boom, off we go again.